Good night, Belize. It is National Disability Awareness Week. We kicked that off on Sunday. And so this whole week, we're going to be having events, hopefully to build some awareness, educate about various disabilities, and hopefully you guys can take part and show your acceptance of people who are slightly different. The theme for Disability Week is Not All Disabilities Are Visible. It's being, the week has been organized mainly by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Science and Technology, headed up by NARCI, the National Resource Center for Inclusive Education. But there have been a lot of organizations such as Autism Belize involved in the planning. BAPTA, Belize Brain Awareness Society, the Inspiration Center, National Council for Persons of Aging. And so this has been a collaborative effort for planning, for having all of these activities going on. I really hope that you guys are taking part, you're signing in. It's all been virtual because we're all trying to be safe and stay healthy. So I really hope you guys will take the advantage of this week and participate. It's not just for people with disabilities, but this is for Belize on a whole and anyone else who wants to tune in, so that we can all learn a little bit more about disabilities. So tonight is our featured guest speaker. I have been bouncing off the walls for weeks about this. If you've run into me online or WhatsApp, you know I've been super excited. We were able to get Dr. Stephen Shore. Dr. Stephen Shore is an autistic professor of special education at the College of Adelphi. He has written several books, including College for Students with Disabilities, Understanding Autism for Dummies, and Beyond the Wall. He currently serves on the board of Autism Speaks and was on the board of the Autism Society of America. In addition to all this, he's internationally renowned for his presentations, consultations, and writings on his lifespan issues, relationships, employment, advocacy, and disclosure. I listened to him speak about a month ago and I was just completely blown away, and I was like, okay, we have to have him speak. And when I found out, he's spoken at like 50 different countries, but not Belize. So yes, he's here to speak to Belize, and I'm very, very excited to have him. So I'm gonna let him come on the screen. I see people are signing in, and that makes me very happy. He's gonna be talking about the 4 A's of autism as a pathway to a fulfilling and productive life. And I'm gonna let him take it away because he's the expert. So let's have him to screen there. Good night.
All right, well, good evening, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, I'm gonna get off the screen and let you take over because you're the pro.
All right, yeah, I'm hearing a horrible echo, but maybe that will go away when you get off the screen.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to...
All right, well, it's great to be here with everyone, and I look forward to sharing my experiences on the autism spectrum and what we can do to promote fulfilling and productive lives. And in doing so, promoting fulfilling and productive lives as the rule rather than the exception. So let us begin. Let us unlock the doors to fulfilling and productive lives. While I'm talking about autistic individuals, we can also generalize this to people with other conditions. So let us begin by getting into the mind of the autistic individual with the game of what is the difference between the picture on the top and the picture on the bottom. So as you study these details, perhaps you'll notice that the yellow footer is missing here on the pole, on the bottom, but on the top, well, there it is. You look a little bit further. Maybe you'll see that the strap on the horse on the bottom is blue and the one on the top is red. There's about 12 other differences. Somebody seems to have dropped a quarter down here, or some coin, but it doesn't appear to be up here. So in all, here are the differences. And I think there's a few more that I didn't even circle. As we think about these pictures, now it's time for a quiz. What was it a picture of? It was a carousel. What animal is in the foreground? It's a zebra. Or was it a horse? What color is the animal behind the first one? How many animals are in the row closest to us? Well, now it's getting a little bit harder to remember these specific details. And the reason why is that I forced you to perceive these pictures like autistic people perceive the environment. We focus on detail, sometimes at the expense of the whole. So anyways, here we are again, so you can see all those differences and you get the big picture, you might say. But for autistic individuals, we focus on the whole, and I forced you to focus on the whole, which made those second two questions harder to answer. So as we consider detail-oriented thinking, are there situations where it's advantageous to be detail-oriented? Maybe even at the expense of the whole. And some things that come to mind are, for example, working in information technology. Or maybe being a lawyer. Maybe being an investigator. A doctor. A mathematician. An accountant. So in all of these situations, might it be possible to say that if we put a typical person in these situations, that they have a deficit in detail-oriented thinking? And the reason why I bring this up is that we can take the characteristics of autism, such as what is often referred to as a weakness in central coherence, or understanding the concept of the whole, and instead of considering it a weakness, we just look at it as a characteristic, and we can even find situations where what we call characteristics, or I should say what we call weaknesses, can actually be a strength. And even to the point where some of the larger IT companies, such as Microsoft, SAP, Apple, Google, and others, actively seek autistic individuals as their employees because they know some of us can do IT work better than other people. And that some of us can do things that other people can't, or we can do them much more efficiently. So as we consider the characteristics of autism, and as we consider what the strengths are of autistic individuals, often I get asked, what is my son, daughter, student, or maybe people on the spectrum ask me themselves, what am I good at? And I respond to that question with another question. How do they spend most of their time, or would, if you let them do it? And we tend to spend more time doing things that we like to do. We like the things we like to do, we spend more time doing. And then we can start matching to perhaps vocational or avocational possibilities. So I'm interested in the abilities of autistic people. I want to know what is the interest. Things we're interested in, we tend to be good at. It requires us to reframe these characteristics instead of going with the standard definition, deficits in social communication, restricted interests, sensory issues, and so on. Let's just look at them as characteristics and find ways to work with them. What kind of mind does the person have? What is the processing style? Most of us are visually based, but the key word is most, not all. I know many autistic people who are so non-visually based, they can't even read a map, but they will have incredible skills in other areas. So I think the thing to keep in mind is that while we may be visual, and probably will be, it won't necessarily be, whatever type of processing style we have, it's probably going to be to some sort of extreme, and often at the expense of others. So for example, if you're a visual learner, you learn better by seeing, and maybe not so good by hearing. Your hearing is good enough to get you through school, get you through life, get you through work. But for the autistic individual, it may be that the auditory modality of learning and processing is so challenged that it's not even workable. And an example I have is a colleague and friend of mine who's a doctoral student at my university. It took me 3 years to convince her that she could do a doctoral degree. Well, finally, she got accepted to the university. She did her coursework. She got all A's, except in one subject. Quantitative research and statistics is not a math person. So again, we think about strengths and challenges. She has incredible strengths in terms of writing, presenting, processing data, doing research. But insofar as numbers, she's learned a long time ago not to carry a checkbook. She's a cash-only person. She has to see it, she has to feel it, then she can conceive it. And that's an example of an extremely widely varying skill set. Autistic people tend to be a study of extremes. And what that translates to is that the things we're good at, we're incredibly good at. The things we're not so good at, well, yeah, that can be quite a challenge. And again, looking at those characteristics and finding ways to work with those characteristics. It requires us to reconsider how we think about students with differences. So here you see a lot of descriptions and labels of children who are judged to have disabilities in school. You see them in reports. Teachers use these words. Parents read them in reports. Could we reframe how we think about these terms a little bit differently and in a more positive sense, like we see on the right? So maybe the learning disabled child is really just a learning different child. And if we can understand what those differences are in learning, then we can promote success in school. And that's what brings me to the 4 A's of autism. The first A of autism, which we've been at for the past generation or so, is awareness. Autism Speaks, the Autism Society of America, organizations, international organizations in other countries have gotten us good at being aware of autism when it's in our midst, whether it's at home, in school, in the community, at work, to the point where we recognize autism in 1 in 54 people. That's a lot of autism. And what I tell educators is that if you don't have an autistic child in your class, the numbers are going to catch up with you and you'll have one in the next class. And all of this awareness builds a solid foundation for the next step. So we know that somebody is on the autism spectrum. We know what the characteristics are, and we accept those characteristics. So what does that mean? Does it mean that, for example, a child doesn't want to do mathematics? So we just say, okay, that's one of his traits, characteristics, personality, whatever. We're not going to let him do it. We're not going to make him do math. No, we don't work it. That's not how it works. What acceptance means is that we accept, well, he may be challenged at math. He may not be interested in it. However, let's think about this individual holistically and see if we can find a way to get him to enjoy doing math. So we take an interest inventory, and we find that this child is fascinated with using a flight simulator on the computer. And what I often see is that a behavior plan will be set up where the interest that the child lives for is taken away, but they can earn it back if they do math for, say, the first 20 minutes, and then they can play on the flight simulator for the remaining 10. So that's an extrinsic reinforcer that will motivate the child to do whatever they need to do. However, that's working against the characteristics of autism. And with acceptance, we work with the characteristics. And in that way, let's find a way to use this favorite activity in which to teach mathematics. And there's plenty of mathematics involved in flying airplanes. So that's what acceptance is, working with the characteristics as opposed to against the characteristics. That brings us to the third level, which is appreciation. And this is where autistic people are valued for what we can contribute to society. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have the software companies such as Microsoft, SAP, Google, Apple, and so on, actively seeking autistic individuals as their employees because they know that while there may be some challenges, and there's certainly challenges that come with autism, if they didn't exist, we wouldn't be here trying to figure it out. However, we all have to be aware of what the autistic person can do, as opposed to focusing on all the can'ts. And when I hear about all of this autistic geekery, I think it's great. In fact, a colleague and I developed a 40-hour training program to teach young autistic adults everything they needed to know about being successfully employed at SAP, one of the large software companies, everything except how to do IT, because they knew that much better than my colleague and I. But they needed to know everything else that related to the workplace and keeping your job successfully. Well, the company was going to hire 12 out of the 24, but they ended up hiring them all. 5 years later, every single person who was hired is still working, except for one, but he has a good excuse. He moved to the other side of the country. So that's another characteristic of autism, that we can accept and appreciate the desire for routine, the desire for sameness. And this is the individual who shows up to work every single day, no matter what. And I haven't found an employer yet who does not want an employee to show up. So that's appreciation. But as we think about autistic geekery, it's also important to ask the question, what about everybody else? Because only a minority of us are computer geeks. It's a big enough group for IT companies to notice. However, it's a minority. And what about everybody else who has skills in other areas, music, other arts, writing, sports, or whatever it might be? And also, what about those of us who need more supports, perhaps in maintaining our schedule, getting from one place to the other, or communication? And to that end, I know of a fellow in Florida who communicates using an assistive communication device. He doesn't speak. He does need a lot of support in managing his schedule and getting from one place to another. And one of his favorite activities is to fold freshly laundered clothing. Pull them out of the hot dryer and fold them with perfect creases. And he does this faster than anybody I know. I know many people who would like help with their laundry. And he would love to come to Belize to help you with your laundry too. However, you'd have to pay him to do it, because that is his job. He spends all day in a hot laundromat pulling clothes out of a hot dryer, folding them faster and more accurately than anybody else. And he enjoys doing it. He's fulfilled, he's productive, and he's appreciated for what he contributes to society. So we can use these 3 A's for people throughout the spectrum and for people with disabilities and differences in general. Well, there's one more to go, and that's action. Action is the work that we put into gluing those 3 first A's together. Recognizing autism when it exists, working with the characteristics, and finding ways to appreciate what individuals on the autism spectrum bring to the world, bring to society. So my charge to you is, what actions are you going to take to climb the stairs of awareness, acceptance, and appreciation of people with autism and with other differences in your lives? And if you are an autistic person, what are you going to do to maximize your strengths and abilities, while at the same time being aware of and working with the challenges so that you can access those strengths and abilities? So what brings me here to talk to autism to you? Taking it from the beginning, things were pretty typical at first. At 24 hours of age, my wife says I looked like an egg. And then at 18 months, the regressive autism bomb exploded, like what happens to about 30% of us on the spectrum. After 18 months of typical development, there was a loss of functional communication, meltdowns, and withdrawal from the environment. In brief, I became a pretty autistic little kid. And the questions: where does autism come from? What do we do about autism? Although now I see more people asking, what do we do with autism? However, there was so little known about autism in those days that it took my parents a whole year to find a place for diagnosis. And when they did, the doctor said they had never seen such a sick child, and the doctors recommended institutionalization. But fortunately, my parents, like we see ever increasing numbers of parents in the United States and Belize and every country I've been to 51 countries so far, my parents advocated on my behalf and convinced the school to take me in about a year. It was during that year that my parents implemented what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program. And this was a program that emphasized music, movement, sensory integration, narration, and imitation. And that's just today's terminology, because in those days, the concept of early intervention didn't even exist. So it was really parents just trying to desperately reach their kid. And so what did they do? First, they tried to get me to imitate them. That didn't work. But then they flipped it around and imitated me. And once they did that, I became aware of them in my environment. They were able to move me along. And I think the key implication is that as a prerequisite for doing solid and authentic work with an autistic person, you have to develop that trusting relationship first. Then you can move on. And I think that holds true for anybody. And I find the people who are best at being with those on the spectrum and with other conditions are those who build that relationship. So with the work my parents did, speech began to return at age 4. I believe that we have the technology, we have the wherewithal, we have the know-how so that autistic individuals leading fulfilling and productive lives can become the rule rather than the exception. So we can turn away from the closed door of disability, disorder, and deficit and look at the open door of ability. And rather than autism being a bomb, autism becomes da bomb. And how does autism become da bomb? Let's take an example of Robert, a young adult, someone who might have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, needing supports at level 1, formerly known as Asperger's syndrome. So he talks a lot, actually, maybe a little bit too much. So if we think of these characteristics, not as deficits in communication, social interaction, and restricted interests, but just as differences, and consider what the employment implications are of those differences. So for those of us who speak well, our speech patterns tend to be detailed, factual, data-driven, truthful, repetitive. I think you get the idea. But then again, how many times have you asked someone to repeat directions when you're lost? What about social interaction? A brief greeting, a request for directions, and then the people say goodbye. So that works out pretty well too. Where does he get this information? His coworkers have to look it up in a reference. Whereas, because this is one of his passions or deep interests, which I think is better than calling it a restricted interest, he's memorized all the public transportation system information of Greater New York, and he can answer questions much faster than anybody else. So because Robert is autistic, because he has these characteristics, he outperforms his typical coworkers. And this is how we need to take a look at the characteristics of autism. Again, the incredible strengths and abilities. And yes, they are coupled with often significant challenges. So if we can provide accommodations and workarounds for those challenges, we have the possibility of that autistic individual becoming a regional, national, or international expert on a particular subject. So here I am at age 4. I said speech began to return, and I entered the school that initially rejected me. I got reevaluated. Instead of being considered as psychotic and ready for an institution, I got upgraded to neurotic. So things are looking up in the world. I also discovered watch motors. I was found by my parents at age 4, taking apart a watch with a sharp knife. I'd pop open the back, extract the motor, remove some of the gears, spin them around, put it all back together again, and the watch still worked and there weren't any pieces left over. So incredible fine motor control to take apart a watch. Instead of looking at the closed door of disability, disorder, and deficit, my parents considered, well, what can our kid do? And soon they provided all kinds of other devices to take apart and to put back together again. I bring this up because it's important to be thinking about what a child is doing, what are their abilities, what are their interests, and how can they translate to possibly a future area of study or possibly a job. So at this time, maybe it looked like that I could have been a watchmaker, a watch repairman. I would have needed a lot of support and communication and in living as an adult, but at least it was something that I could do. And that's why it's important to be thinking about this early. It's never too early. Doesn't mean that you've charted the person's entire life trajectory at age 4 or whenever you know when someone's been diagnosed, but you can start looking at the strengths, the abilities, and the interests. My parents made a big deal about this. They were building a sense of self-awareness, which is also important because that's critical for making good adult decisions. So building self-determination, self-awareness, knowing what it means to you to be autistic and what that brings in terms of strengths and challenges. So let's consider Arvind, the artist. He's a middle school student, limited speaking ability. He spends hours drawing shapes using crayons on big pieces of paper. From a very young age, anyone who tried to remove these drawing materials in hopes of getting him to engage with others, he would have a huge meltdown. Unable to achieve success in getting Arvind to join his classmates, Arvind's teachers now permit him to just while the day away with his crayons and his papers. So while he's in the same room as everybody else, with the regular students, he's not interacting with them. And I think the best we could do is call that geographical and not real inclusion. So what can we do to work with, not against? Not to take this drawing away, which didn't seem to work anyways, and then making Arvind earn it back, but to work with the drawing. So I was called into California to consult on this very person. I changed the names, of course, to maintain confidentiality. And there the child was drawing. I sat on the other side of the paper, and I started drawing too. And he kind of gave me a look and then went back to his work. And I found that I could draw right up against his drawings and even color in spaces that he didn't color in. He didn't mind. I didn't know how much communication he had or what he understood, so I held up a crayon and asked him what color was it. He told me, green. He was right about all the colors I held up. I could say here and give it to him, and then he'd use that color to draw. I could also ask him to pick up a particular color and give it to me so I could draw. So clearly, it was clear to me that drawing needed to be used. We needed to work with his drawing in order to develop a relationship. Arvind didn't have a meltdown when I came to draw with him, probably because he sensed that I wasn't there to take his drawing away, but I was just there to be with him and to enjoy drawing with him. So that is a start. And from there, we can start teaching Arvind what he needs to learn. At age 6, I entered regular school kindergarten. That was a social and academic catastrophe. You know what happens to people who are different in grade school? I guess saying the letter B over and over again didn't endear me to my classmates. Fortunately, school systems are now beginning to realize that bullying is not a developmental phase that people need to go through, but something needs to be done about it. Academically, I was about a grade behind in most of my subjects, but I still liked school because I would spend most of my time going to the library, getting the books on my favorite subjects, reading them, taking notes, copying diagrams, putting them away, and getting books on something else. Subjects such as space exploration, earthquakes, dinosaurs, volcanoes, weather, electricity, and so on. And sometimes I'd even wonder in elementary school, because this is pretty much what I did, is there more to school than just reading my books? Shouldn't I be reading in groups or doing math with other people? And I think what it translated to is that teachers didn't quite know how to reach me, but since I wasn't a behavior problem, they just left me to my own devices. And in those days, it was probably for better rather than for worse. As we talk about transition, and in the United States, transition is mandated at age 16. That's when we start thinking about how is the child going to spend their adult years, either employment or living situation and whatever else you do as an adult. And I believe that this 16 is way too late, as I was suggesting before, and that the number would be much better if we just took off 1 and was left with the 6, starting at age 6. Actually, I think we should be starting at age, as soon as we know that somebody is on the autism spectrum, and be thinking about what can today's activities, what are the implications of today's interests and activities for future areas of study and possible employment. At age 8, I would spend hours cracking open small rocks with a big rock. I was fascinated by the shiny specks inside, the sharp edges. And that grew into a highly focused interest in geology, geography, many others. I remember I had a stack of astronomy books on my desk, and a teacher told me that I'd never learn how to do math. But somehow I figured out just enough math to teach statistics at the university level. Now, fortunately, these days, increasing numbers of educators would notice this astronomy-focused interest. And just like my example earlier with the child who liked flight simulators but had a hard time with math, maybe we could find some math inside of astronomy and make the subject intrinsically reinforcing. We all learn better about what we're interested in. If we're interested in something, we're probably good at it too. And for autistic individuals, it's just to a greater extreme. I started getting interested in bicycles. Maybe it had to do with the rotating parts. But whatever it was, I got it to a point where I could take a bicycle apart down to the ball bearings and get that back together again. So maybe that could suggest future employment as a bicycle mechanic. Then we have Greg the ball thrower. Greg is a young child, elementary school. He doesn't speak. And he loves to do nothing more than to take a ball and throw it. That's just what he does. If you try to take the ball away, you end up in a meltdown. Only happens with balls, this particular object. It's written in Greg's plan that all balls be kept out of sight. Teachers aren't always successful in doing so. He's the type of kid as if there's a ball anywhere in the room, even in a closed door, he will find it. And once he gets his hand on one of these objects, then it's just all over. So he's considered as one of the school's most difficult students. So why is Greg doing what he's doing? Is there a way to allow Greg to be in the same room as a ball? What can we do to implement the plan? How might we consider Greg's fascination with these objects to increase social interaction? So commonly, again, we would identify the ball as a powerful reinforcer and then work with Greg to earn that ball back to use during his break. So, okay, Greg, let's sit at the table, do whatever task we come up with. All right, now it's break time, time with the ball. He enjoys that. Ball, break time is over, take the ball away. Greg has a meltdown. So you only get one cycle. So maybe I'd be a little contrarian and come into the room with a whole sack of balls. Big ones, little ones, different colors, different materials. And I'd immediately hand him a ball. He'd take it and predictably he'd throw it. And I'd give him another one. He'd take it and he'd throw it. And I'd build up a sort of routine or a system according to the Miller method. And then I'd maybe make some small changes in that routine, such as present the ball in different places, different color balls, maybe hold the ball close to my nose so that he has to orient to me to pick up the ball and just throw it. So what I'm doing is I'm building a relationship with Greg. I'm becoming the provider of a favorite object as opposed to the taker or weigher of a particular object. Once we get that relationship going, let's use these balls to teach what he needs to be taught. Counting, identifying colors, categorizing, opening up a box, for example, and taking out 3 balls, going to another person to get a ball, bringing the ball to another person. And in that way, becoming a trusted provider of an interest and working with that, not against, but with, and teaching Greg what he needs to learn. Special interests. You may know of autistic people who get so fascinated with things that maybe it interferes with daily functioning. However, that's a deficit way of thinking about special interests. What if we reframe special interests as an interest of such great intensity that it provides powerful motivation for learning mathematics, for learning other curriculum, for exploring job opportunities, for socializing with others? So these are some of my special interests. They come and they go. Sometimes there's more than one of them at a time. And make sure you get them all because there will be a quiz at the end. Here I am at age 10. I was so concerned about the letter E because I heard you have to drop E before adding ing. Wasn't this E going to get hurt when it fell to the ground? I had a friend who said he felt like a pizza, he didn't look like one, he didn't smell like one, so there were some issues there. I remember a class being interrupted by an announcement the principal had lost his mother. Well, upon hearing that, that made me think of what my parents would tell me when I lost something. They'd tell me it was in the last place I left it, which I thought was a silly answer because if I knew that, I wouldn't be asking them. However, I thought if that was something my parents could tell me, probably thousands of times, maybe I could help the principal, who I really liked, and suggest that if he thought really hard as to where he last saw his mother, I never heard of anybody losing their mother anyways. You should always know where your mother is. And maybe he could find her. Well, that didn't go over well at all. What does it mean to lose one's mother? It means she passed away. It's an idiom. But even what does passed away mean? So you have to go through 2 idioms and finally get to the fact that she died. Simple as that. So if it looks like we're being rude, we're being disrespectful, if we're talking back, maybe we're just interpreting the situation very literally. That's another characteristic, literal interpretation of the environment and communication. And that may be because we have difficulty perceiving and decoding the nonverbal cues that inform us when someone's telling a joke, engaging in sarcasm, or using an idiom. Literal thought. Research suggests that the nonverbal component of communication may be as much as 93%, which means that we may only be getting as little as 7%, or just words. So we have no choice but to be literal. And that brings us to the concept of the hidden curriculum. All the unspoken rules, and there's lots of them. Where is the hidden curriculum? The hidden curriculum exists anytime you're with another person. And there are unspoken expectations. And we don't see these expectations written anywhere or discussed. They just exist. And so for example, in a classroom, it's expected students raise their hand and be recognized by a teacher before they talk. It's also assumed that when you're talking with another person, you take turns talking instead of monologuing about a particular subject. Most people figure this out on their own. But for autistic people, we may need direct instruction. You ask one of us to hold the door, and we'll be wondering why you want us to pick up the door. You tell one of us that you'll get to our question in a minute as a teacher or a parent, And guess who's counting the seconds? And if you're not there in 60 seconds, well, then that's going to be a problem. However, the good news is that we can learn the hidden curriculum. We just need direct instruction. And that way we can work around what is usually black and white thinking. But again, in using a strength-based approach to thinking about autism, is always the question, what are some situations where it's advantageous to engage in black and white thinking? Now, here I am at age 13. You don't need to be autistic to have difficulties in middle and high school. But for me, it was actually easier for two big reasons. One is I figured out that using words instead of sound effects from the environment really helped with social interaction. And then number two, I was able to engage in my highly focused interest of music. And that's one of the advantages of middle and high school, even though it can be a very difficult time, is that's where you start seeing courses, clubs, and activities based on particular interests. Well, I joined the band. Now I had a structured activity in which to mediate my interactions with others. I got so fascinated with music that I got it into my head that I needed to learn how to play all the instruments. So I would go into the instrument closet, pull out the instruments, take them apart, figure out how they worked. And while I didn't learn them all, I did get it up to about 15. And then when I heard that a requirement for a degree in music education at the college level was that you had to learn all the instruments, well, that just seemed to be the thing to do, and that's what I did when I got to college. I also like to give music lessons to autistic children, and there's many reasons. In addition to the therapeutic benefits of engaging in music, music is an interest that can be used to develop interactions with others, develop relationships, and get involved in the community as a musician. Also, music is just plain old fun. And then finally, I haven't figured out how to teach typical kids yet, so I just stick with the ones on the spectrum. They make a lot more sense to me. However, it's important to realize that music is a very sensory activity. There's a lot of noise, well, there can be. And I remember as a trombone player, I was seated in front of the trumpets in jazz band. And they were just too loud. And I complained to the director. Director really wouldn't do anything. There was so little known about autism and sensory issues those days. So I would skip jazz band rehearsal. And nobody knew why, even though I would tell them. So there's one thing that's important to keep in mind is that you're trying to determine why a person is doing something that they're doing. You need to understand the function of the behavior. Why is it happening? Why am I skipping jazz band? Do I not like the music? Do I not like the director? Do I not like the trombone because it's smelly, needs to be cleaned? Do I not like my classmates? So those four examples have different resolutions. However, it was none of the above. They were just too loud. One day I marched into the band director's office with a set of alternate seating charts and demand that he make a change, but he wouldn't do it. But now, fortunately, I know a lot more about effective self-advocacy. And also there's a lot more known about autism in the schools, so that's good. So playing an instrument, I'll show you this quick video that demonstrates what I do, or at least what I do with some children on the spectrum. This child is a non-speaking child, but still he can learn to play the piano just like anybody else.
Ethan, come over here. Give Mommy the straw. A, B, C, D, E.
For autistic people who were diagnosed when autism was unknown, there was little support. Their parents, for the most part, were on their own.
Take an A. Take an A from here. Ethan, A. We eventually get to a stage where, without talking about it, he's reading music. So So when we get to piano book number 1, he'll already know how to read it and understand it, and it will be friendly. I remember having piano lessons at age 6, and I think the best thing that I learned from these music lessons was how not to teach children on the autism spectrum how to play music. I think the goal of intervention is to help that person lead a fulfilling and productive life with the strengths that they have. The potential of those of us with autism is like the potential of anybody else. It's unlimited.
So that's just one thing I do when I'm at home well, now I'm home a lot more often because of the pandemic. And giving music lessons to children on the spectrum, I find that just like people not on the spectrum, some of my students could be professional musicians if they so chose. Others work harder at it. Some of my students don't speak. Others talk too much, and everything in the middle. So then we have Robert the Wayfinder. He's the same guy who is giving instructions to at the train station, and he does well. He's spot on, but he talks too fast. So what can we do to help Robert speed up? Well, I should say slow down. What could his supervisor do? Maybe role play. Maybe write it down on a sticky note and have these sticky notes all around his station. He may need frequent reminders to talk at a slower speed, and maybe find someone who could talk really fast, faster than Robert could take down information, so that he has an idea of what a proper speed is to talk. Perhaps even have Robert go on YouTube and find some examples where people are talking just too fast, and other examples where they're talking at a more typical speed. So these are things that Robert's supervisor can do in order to promote his success in doing his job and keeping his job. So speaking of jobs, it's important to match employment to abilities, strengths, and interests. What you see here represents my first formal job, where I got a paycheck every couple of weeks. It was in a noisy restaurant, cleaning tables. It was a real basket full of sensory violations. It was just too loud, too much movement. It didn't work. So it made me realize I needed to do something else. And I thought about, well, what can I do? What do I like to do? I thought about my bicycles, and then I was pretty good at taking apart and putting it back together again. Why not be a bicycle mechanic? So I turned away from the closed door of what didn't work. And I made the rounds of the bicycle shops in the area, about a dozen of them. I'd go into the shop, I'd find the manager, I'd nerd into my bicycle with the manager, talking about all kinds of esoteric things about bicycles. And then I'd ask him for a job. And it took 11 times, but on the 12th time, I did get a job as a bicycle mechanic. I could manage my own sensory input by staying in the back of the shop, fixing bicycles, or I could go to the front of the shop and perseverate on bicycles to people who walked in. Although I think the supervisor of the shop called that selling bicycles. So again, it's important to be aware of one's characteristics and abilities and to work with these characteristics. Fixing bicycles, and had my trajectory gone in a slightly different way and didn't involve as much college as it did, maybe I'd be still fixing bicycles and very happy doing that, or maybe even owning a bicycle shop. In college, I also fixed bicycles. I plastered the entire campus with these signs, and soon I had a dozen bicycles in my dorm room in various stages of repair. And it was a great way to spend a Saturday fixing bicycles for the whole day and coming out with maybe $200 at the end, having much more fun, much more enjoyable than working, say, doing a work-study job, being a security guard, or working in the dining commons. So when thinking about achieving employment success, again, it's a matter of characteristics, job attributes, and positions. And as we look at these characteristics, what can we do with that person? The person who doesn't speak much, but likes things to be in order. Maybe that person could work in a library to make sure all the books are in exactly the right place. Or perhaps stocking shelves, where there's a system set up where everything that comes in has a particular stock number, and each shelf and each place on a shelf has a sign with that stock number, and it's a matter of matching. And for those of us who like things to be in order, this can be a great job. Sensory stimulation. So we talked about folding clothes. That works in this case. So again, it's a matter of working with the characteristics. So on to college. I had more friends. The bullies were gone. If I wanted to ride my bicycle at midnight, I could find someone just as strange as I was to also ride at midnight. Dating occurs in college. That was a challenge. I remember my first encounter in undergraduate school. After spending a lot of time with this lady, she suddenly told me that she likes hugs and back rubs. And while I think that has a particular meaning, but for me, as one who thought literally, and as one who, with sensory issues, would be a deep pressure seeker, then I'd be happy to get back rubs all day. However, I think she had other ideas. And after a lot of conversation, I realized she wanted to be my girlfriend. Well, I wasn't interested, so we kind of split off from there. Because what I thought was, I've got this brand new friend. And she also doubles as a source of deep pressure, like a Temple Grandin squeeze machine. But alas, she wasn't. Well, what this did tell me is there was this whole area of communication that we call nonverbal, which then became my next special or highly focused interest. I'd spend hours reading books on body language, relationships, dating for dummies, and so on, building a lexicon of nonverbal communication. Well, now we're in graduate school. I'm spending a lot of time with this lady, initially reviewing each other's homeworks, and then doing things socially. Then one day at a beach like this, she gave me a hug, a kiss, and held my hand. And now I had the social story down. And it went like this. If a woman hugs you, kisses you, and holds your hand all at about the same time, it probably means they want to be your girlfriend. If that's the case, you better have an answer right away. It could either be yes, it could be no, or it could be further investigation and analysis as indicated. Well, it seemed to be a good thing to do. And now we've been married for over 30 years. And if you want to find out what life is like on her side of the spectrum, I encourage you to read her contributions to my autobiography, Beyond the Wall. And now as an adult, I spend a lot of time in a sheltered workshop for people with Asperger's syndrome, where we perseverate on subjects for months and years and entire lifetimes. We talk about them, whether people want to listen or not. Sometimes social interaction between community members could be improved. Some people refer to this place as a university. If you want to find undiagnosed people on the autism spectrum, just check out your professors. And when I am not at the university, teaching and researching mostly on autism, traveling to different countries, different country about once a month. Well, that was before the pandemic. I was traveling to a different country about once a month and had been to 51 countries. Not sure which country is going to become 52 when the pandemic lifts. Maybe it could be Belize. That would be great. Be great to visit you all in person. And when not traveling, I'm also writing books and articles on autism, and finally giving music lessons to children on the autism spectrum. So as we finish our time together today. My question to you is whether autism is a series of deficits, disorder, and disability, or is it a set of abilities? And what are you going to do to transform what is often considered a weakness or a challenge into a strength? So here's some typical autistic challenges. Everything has to be in exact order. Extreme routine, hypersensitive sound. And I know many examples where people have taken these very challenges and they've turned them on their heads and they've now become strengths and something that people seek and they contribute to the community. So as we turn away from closed doors to open doors, and we look at promoting success as the rule rather than the exception, what is success? And as I think about success for autistic individuals, I think that if we have someone who's productive and fulfilled with their life, and they're probably successful. So maybe it's that it could be that individual who's folding laundry all day and really not doing anything else but enjoying it and contributing to society. It could be someone like Temple Grandin, who's probably the most well-known autistic person in the world, who's known even more well-known in the industry of cattle processing than she is in the autism world. And it's all through our journey in life, as we go from goal to goal, from activity to activity. Contact me at my website, drstevenshore.com. And if you forget that, then just look me up, Stephen Shore Autism, on Google, and the website will come up and you can contact me that way as well. So now we're ready for Q&A if there are questions.
Yeah, let's see if anybody has any questions out there. Just type it in the comment section on Facebook, and we will bring them up on the screen and try and answer your questions if anyone has any. If anyone's there. But thank you so much. I absolutely enjoyed that.
Oh, well, you're welcome. It was a pleasure to present for you.
15 instruments, really? Do you still play them?
Yeah, when I can get to them, yeah.
Yeah, we've got one just saying great presentation and useful information. That's really good. Oh, there's another one there. What a great presentation.
Thank you.
Any questions out there? I'm glad you guys like this, though. I did too. 15 instruments.
Yeah, well, here's one of them.
The flute there. And do you still take apart watches and bikes, or you're just too busy now?
I'm too busy, but every now and then I come across a watch or a bicycle that needs to be taken apart and fixed, so I can still do it.
So you still go back to some of your old interests?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, here we've got one here. In what area does a person who wants to work and research on autism need to specialize in?
Well, usually people who want to work and research on autism will get a degree, one or more degrees in special education or possibly psychology.
There we go. Another good presentation there. What's your favorite instrument?
It depends on my mood, but the instruments that I'm most familiar with are trombone, piano, recorder, and trumpet, and maybe a few others.
Okay, here we go. Thank you for your presentation, illuminating. How do you use music to reach children on the spectrum? Good one.
Well, what I find is that whatever scrambles the speech centers of the brain tends to leave the musical ones intact. So often music by itself is just interesting to autistic individuals. So for example, I had one student with Asperger's syndrome, and he had a lot of ADD too. So I couldn't really talk to him. But if we sang our communications, then he would pay attention and he would engage. So everything that we had to communicate, we just sang it back and forth.
Singing. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation. I learned so much. Anyone here enjoyed the presentation? Wonderful. I have a nephew who's like that learned a lot through music with singing as well. He was really talented like that. Very informative and enlightening. Thank you very much. Oh, here we go. Oh, from Canada. Hello from Canada. Are there good government supports for autism, or is the support mostly from nonprofit organizations? I guess that one's more for me in Belize. Belize is still very much developing when it comes for programs and support. We have the National Resource Center for Inclusive Education, NARCI, who helps with the schooling. But as opposed for the wider area of things, whether it's from diagnosis to treatments, Belize does have a long way to go. I am cautiously optimistic that from the different health organizations that are coming together, especially with this week, and the talks that are taking part, that we recognize that we have a deficit and that we need to build capacity. But we definitely do have a long way to go. I think we're still at the awareness building, getting into appreciation, and as terms of access and support, we do have some ways to go. Yes, unfortunately, but we're going to get there. Excellent. Love the slide on weaknesses and strengths. Yeah, you turn the weakness into a strength there. Have you worked with hyperlexic children? What kind of career could they seek?
Well, when I teach music to hyperlexic children, hyperlexia is a gift, because what hyperlexic children do is they get over-involved in symbols and translate those symbols into sounds. So when it comes to reading, they translate those symbols into words. When it comes to musical notation, they're just off and running. So it's really just a matter of setting up the environment and all the materials for them, and there they go. What kind of career could they seek? Well, a lot of it depends on the individual and their interests. Maybe something related to reading or decoding of some sort could be a good way to go.
Encouraging presentation. I like this one. What would be your one advice to give autism parents?
My advice to autism parents is that your autistic child has unlimited potential. And what our job is, educators, parents, and anybody else supporting individuals on the spectrum, is to find ways to unlock that potential.
Sounds easier than I think it is.
Yeah, it's a very easy thing to say.
Unlocking their potential. It is inspiring, though, as an autism parent, to listen to you. It really sort of gives you hope that, especially I know a lot of our parents that are commenting here have younger kids, and I feel like this would have been very inspirational for so many of them. I love special abilities as opposed to disabilities.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Special abilities. I especially like the study of extremes. That's my son.
Yeah.
He's always the extreme. He's going to do whatever, and he's going to do it all the way to the extreme.
Right.
For it. Anybody else? We've stolen an hour of his time. Oh, here we go. Here's another one. This really has been inspiring. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my honor.
And it has been. Well, I don't see anything else coming up. Dr. Shore, this was, oh, here we go. Something else. Where can we find your memoir?
You can find it on Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. There you go. I was going to say thank you. I know you are extremely busy. I've seen your schedule on different emails that are coming in with the various presentations you're doing. So I know you're extremely busy. And I did ask you last minute, and I am very, very grateful for you responding and showing up tonight. And we do have one last one. Did you tell your wife early on that you were on the spectrum?
Oh, that's an interesting question because I told her twice. The first time, she didn't really understand. And the second time, I found, my wife is Chinese, so I found some information translated into Chinese. And the interesting thing is that she was fine with me being autistic, but she was terrified that somebody else would find out. Because if they did, I'd lose some sort of face, and somebody would tell my supervisor, and I'd lose my job. But understanding that she grew up during the Cultural Revolution, where people did lose jobs and face for associating with people having disabilities, that's all understandable. But now, but after a while, she realized that I had something to give back to the community, and she's my greatest supporter.
That's great. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
We've seen, for the longest time, you'd refer to and say a person on the spectrum or a person with a disability. And more now you're seeing autistic person, and you describe yourself in your bios and stuff as an autistic professor.
That's right.
Does it go either way? Which would you recommend if we're referring to a person?
Well, what I find is that most people on the spectrum who have the ability to express their views in a way that we can understand identify with being autistic. So they're autistic people.
People, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll go to autism first.
Yeah, so it's sort of like you probably don't talk about people with Belizeism.
We say Belizeans.
Yeah, you're just Belizeans. Yeah, you're a Belizean. You're not with Belizean.
With Belize. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
But some of us still prefer person first. So I think the best thing to do is just ask.
Ask which is better.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So I will let you go now because I've kept you for over an hour, but thank you very, very, very much. I do hope that once the pandemic is more under control that you will consider coming to Belize and you let us know so that we can show you a true Belizean great time.
Oh yeah, well, that'll be great. Yeah, let's see if we can put something together, maybe a workshop or something.
It would be my honor to do so. Thank you very much.
We'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for everyone who is still here, please remember we have activities for the rest of the week. Tomorrow we have our special needs yoga, the adult version, 7 o'clock tonight, right here tomorrow night on Autism Belize Facebook page. And then Thursday, we're having a panel discussion with some Belizean youths who are also on the spectrum, or autistic youths, who will talk about their experiences of growing up in Belize on the spectrum and going to school and how they find things. So it's going to be interesting to hear their perspective of things. So you can join us on Thursday evening right here as well. And also keep up with Inspiration Center's page, on the Ministry of Education's page, because they are posting a lot of things all this week. So you can keep learning and, you know, showing your acceptance for people who are slightly different than someone else. Okay, thank you guys very, very much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Shore, and everyone have a good night.
Thanks, and you too.
Take care.
Take care.